As the sun rose on September 1, 1939, the world found itself plunged into the maelstrom of World War II. From the ashes of the Great War, a new conflict emerged, fueled by ideological differences and territorial ambitions. The world was divided into two major camps: the Allies led by the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Soviet Union, and the Axis powers, spearheaded by Nazi Germany, Italy, and Japan. In the initial stages of the conflict, a peculiar peace was established between two unlikely bedfellows, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Despite their ideological disparities, both nations found a temporary common ground. This uneasy truce, however, was not destined to last. Amidst the global turmoil, the gears of war were slowly turning, setting the stage for a military campaign that would dramatically alter the course of the war and the world as we know it. In this precarious balance of power, the stage was set for Operation Barbarossa, one of the most significant military campaigns in human history. In the years leading up to 1941, Europe was a chessboard of shifting alliances and strategic maneuvers. Central to this was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement inked between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union in August of 1939. This pact, named after the foreign ministers of the two countries, Vyacheslav Molotov and Joachim von Ribbentrop, was a tactical move designed to prevent a two-front war for Germany. For a while, the pact seemed to be working well. Germany and the Soviet Union even carved up Eastern Europe between themselves, with the Soviets taking the Baltic states and parts of Romania, while Germany absorbed most of Poland. The two nations, once bitter ideological enemies, were now cautious partners. But beneath the surface, tensions were simmering. Adolf Hitler, the Führer of Nazi Germany, saw the Soviet Union not as a partner, but as a vast reservoir of resources ripe for the taking. He also harbored a deep animosity towards communism, viewing it as a mortal threat to his vision of a racially pure and dominant Germany. Moreover, Hitler believed that Britain, Germany's main adversary in the West, was holding out hope that the Soviet Union would enter the war on its side. By invading the Soviet Union, Hitler hoped to dash these hopes and force Britain into submission. As 1941 dawned, Hitler's gaze turned eastward. Despite warnings from his generals about the perils of a two-front war, he was undeterred. In his mind, the Soviet Union was a colossus of clay, ready to collapse under the weight of the superior German forces. Little did he know this decision would mark a turning point in the Second World War. As the Nazi war machine prepared for action, Operation Barbarossa was about to shatter the peace. In every war, planning and preparation are the keys to success or failure. This was certainly true for Operation Barbarossa. The German High Command had the audacious task of orchestrating the largest invasion in the history of warfare. The strategic objective was clear: the rapid defeat of the Soviet Union. The plan hinged on the concept of Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The idea was to strike hard and fast, encircling and destroying enemy forces before they had time to respond. The Germans believed that this strategy, which had been so successful in Poland and France, would work against the Soviets too. The invasion was designed to be a three-pronged assault. Army Group North would head towards Leningrad, Army Group Center was to advance on Moscow, and Army Group South had its sights set on Ukraine. The goal was to seize key industrial and agricultural areas, crippling the Soviet capacity to wage war. But the scale and complexity of the operation was unprecedented. The German forces had to assemble an invasion force of over 3 million men, tens of thousands of tanks and aircraft, and millions of tons of supplies. Preparations needed to be done in utmost secrecy to maintain the element of surprise. Challenges were aplenty. The Soviet Union was a vast country with diverse terrain and unpredictable weather. The Germans had to plan for the vast Russian steppes, dense forests, and large rivers. The harsh Russian winter was another factor that could not be ignored. The German military also underestimated the strength and resilience of the Red Army, a mistake that would have severe consequences. Furthermore, the German economy was stretched to its limits. The resources required for such a massive campaign were immense. Despite these challenges, the German military, with their renowned efficiency, managed to get ready for the invasion. With their plans in place, the German forces stood on the brink of a campaign that would change the course of the war. They were about to step into a conflict that would test their might and strategy to the limits, the echoes of which would be felt for generations to come. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa burst into action. the German war machine roared to life, marking the start of the largest military operation in history. The German forces, with their perfected Blitzkrieg tactics, lightning-fast, concentrated attacks meant to shock and disorient the enemy, swept across the Soviet border. The opening stages of the operation saw the Germans advancing at a breathtaking pace. They penetrated deep into Soviet territory, covering hundreds of miles in just a few weeks. The Soviets, taken by surprise, found themselves on the back foot. One of the key battles in these early stages was the Battle of Bialystok-Minsk. Here, the German forces encircled a vast number of Soviet troops, dealing a crushing blow to the Red Army. The speed and ferocity of the German offensive, combined with the tactical encirclement, led to a rapid German victory. This battle was a testament to the effectiveness of the Blitzkrieg strategy, and it set the tone for the early phase of the invasion. The German forces also made significant gains in the Battle of Smolensk. By capturing this key city, they effectively cut off the main route to Moscow, sending a chilling message to the Soviets. Moscow was within their reach. The Germans' rapid advance was not just due to their military prowess, but also their ruthless efficiency. They exploited the element of surprise, the disarray in the Soviet command structure, and the unpreparedness of the Red Army. Every victory bolstered their confidence, and with each passing day, their belief in a swift victory over the Soviets grew stronger. In just a few short weeks, the Germans had pushed deep into Soviet territory, capturing key strategic points and inflicting heavy casualties on the Red Army. Operation Barbarossa, it seemed, was living up to its grand promise. The German forces appeared unstoppable. Their Blitzkrieg tactics, combined with their superior training and equipment, made them a formidable adversary. As the German forces pushed deeper into Soviet territory, it seemed that nothing could stop them. Their rapid advance painted a grim picture for the Soviets. Little did they know, however, that the tide of the war was about to change. The Soviet Union was caught off guard, but it was far from defeated. With this sudden and brutal invasion, the Soviets found themselves reeling. The Red Army, although vast in numbers, was poorly equipped and ill-prepared to face the German war machine. Their initial response was disjointed and chaotic, marked by a lack of coordination and often an absence of clear leadership. The Red Army, in the early stages of Operation Barbarossa, faced a series of devastating defeats. The Battle of Bialystok-Minsk, for instance, saw the encirclement and destruction of significant Soviet forces, a pattern that would repeat itself in the subsequent battles. The Germans, employing their Blitzkrieg tactics, seemed unstoppable, swiftly advancing deep into Soviet territory. The Battle of Smolensk, another key confrontation, further underscored the Red Army's vulnerabilities. Despite a fierce resistance, the Soviets were unable to prevent another encirclement, resulting in the capture of over 300,000 troops. These battles painted a grim picture of the Red Army's position, but they also illuminated the flaws in the German strategy. The German forces, as they pushed eastward, were stretching their supply lines thin, and their rapid advance was not without cost. This relentless pace, while initially advantageous, began to take its toll, resulting in fatigue among the troops and wear and tear on their equipment. Meanwhile, the Soviets, despite suffering heavy losses, were learning from their mistakes, making crucial adjustments to their defensive strategies. They began to abandon the concept of static defense lines, instead adopting a strategy of defense in depth, where they would trade space for time, slowly wearing down the German forces. At the same time, the Soviet Union was mobilizing its vast resources, shifting industries eastward, away from the front lines, and ramping up the production of armaments. The Red Army was being replenished, its ranks swelled by a tide of new recruits eager to defend their homeland. Despite these setbacks, the Soviets were far from beaten, and their resistance was growing. Their spirit remained unbroken, and they were preparing to turn the tide of war in their favor. The tide of war is ever-changing, and in the harsh winter of 1941, it began to turn. As the German advance pushed deeper into Soviet territory, they found themselves facing not only a determined enemy, but also an environment that was unyielding and unforgiving. One of the significant turning points of Operation Barbarossa was the Battle of Moscow. The German forces, underestimating the Soviets' resolve and resilience, aimed to capture the capital city. However, the Soviets were not so easily defeated. They rallied their forces and resources, putting up a fierce resistance that eventually pushed the Germans back. The Battle of Moscow wasn't just a military confrontation, it was a symbol of the Soviet Union's determination to protect their homeland. The city's defense showcased the Soviet Union's ability to mobilize its resources and manpower in the face of adversity. The population was mobilized, with everyone from factory workers to school children contributing to the war effort. But the Battle of Moscow wasn't the only challenge the German forces faced. The harsh winter conditions of the Russian landscape became a formidable foe. The German forces, accustomed to the milder winters of Central Europe, were ill-prepared for the freezing temperatures, which often dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. These severe conditions took a heavy toll on the German troops, affecting their mobility, morale, and overall capability to wage war. The tanks and other vehicles often froze, guns jammed, and soldiers suffered from frostbite and hypothermia. The winter of 1941 was a brutal adversary that the German forces were not equipped to fight. Despite these challenges, the Soviet Union's resilience was undeterred. They adapted to the changing circumstances, using the harsh winter to their advantage. They implemented tactics that were better suited to the weather conditions and the landscape, such as using ski troops for rapid movement and white camouflage for concealment. The Soviet Union also ramped up its industrial production, moving entire factories from the western parts of the country to the east, away from the front lines. This ensured a steady supply of weapons and equipment to the frontline troops, enabling them to continue the fight. But perhaps the most significant factor in the Soviet resistance was the spirit of the Russian people. They fought with a fierce determination, driven by a deep-seated patriotism and a resolve to protect their homeland. This spirit was a powerful force that bolstered the Soviet Union's defense and eventually turned the tide of the war. The winter of 1941 marked a turning point. The German advance was halted, and the Soviets began to fight back. This shift was a testament to the Soviet Union's resilience and adaptability in the face of adversity. It was a turning point that would have profound implications for the course of World War II, setting the stage for the eventual defeat of the German forces on the Eastern Front. War leaves a lasting scar, and Operation Barbarossa was no exception. This cataclysmic event, one of the largest military invasions in history, had long-term consequences that extended far beyond the Eastern Front and World War II. First, let's talk about the human cost. Millions of lives were lost during Operation Barbarossa, both military and civilian. The exact number is hard to pin down, but estimates suggest that more than 5 million Soviet soldiers and countless civilians fell victim to the relentless violence of war. The loss was immense, and the grief incalculable. The material costs were also staggering. Cities, villages, and infrastructure were obliterated, leaving a trail of destruction that took decades to rebuild. The Soviet Union's economy was pushed to the brink as the country mobilized for total war. Meanwhile, Germany drained its resources in this ambitious invasion, which eventually contributed to its downfall. The impact on civilian populations was profound. Under the brutal occupation, millions of Soviet citizens were subjected to horrific violence, hunger, and displacement. This period left a deep psychological scar on the people, the effects of which can still be felt today. On a broader scale, Operation Barbarossa significantly altered the course of World War II. The failure of Germany to swiftly defeat the Soviet Union marked a crucial turning point. It stretched German resources thin and opened up the Eastern Front, where the majority of German military casualties occurred. This strategic blunder by Hitler allowed the Allies to gain momentum on other fronts. Operation Barbarossa also set the stage for the start of the Cold War. The intense rivalry and mistrust between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union, which were exacerbated by the events of the invasion, laid the foundation for the decades-long standoff that followed World War II. In short, the ripples of Operation Barbarossa went far beyond the immediate battlefield. It shaped the outcome of World War II, reconfigured global power dynamics, and left a lasting impact on the people who lived through it. Operation Barbarossa changed the course of the war and left a lasting mark on history. Operation Barbarossa, a campaign of unprecedented scale and consequence, holds many lessons. This colossal undertaking, the largest military invasion in history, was marked by a series of strategic blunders, unanticipated setbacks, and a fierce resistance that eventually turned the tide of the war. From the initial success of the Blitzkrieg tactics to the ill-preparedness for the harsh Russian winter, the German forces experienced both triumph and defeat. The Soviet Union, despite facing severe losses and setbacks, showcased an incredible ability to adapt and resist. The Battle of Moscow and the unforgiving winter conditions became turning points, demonstrating the resilience of the Red Army and the Soviet people. The human and material cost of Operation Barbarossa was immense, impacting civilian populations and reshaping the Eastern Front. This campaign not only influenced the course of World War II, but also left a lasting imprint on the geopolitical landscape. In the annals of history, Operation Barbarossa stands as a stark reminder of the human capacity for destruction and the enduring spirit of resistance.